Mixed cranial nerves are going to include cranial nerve number 5 here up top. Okay, cranial nerve number 7, you can see that one. And down here on the bottom, this is cranial nerve number 9. Is one of your mixed cranial nerves. So lots of different functions here for these mixed cranial nerves. Okay, we'll take them each in turn. So cranial nerve number 5 is going to be your trigeminal. And the origin, also let's draw that in here. So here's your 5th cranial nerve coming out the side of the pons. Okay, so that's your trigeminal nerve. And the origin, we're just going to say, is the pons. Okay, the function. There's a few that we have to know. As far as the trigeminal nerve, you can think of it as more sensory than motor. Okay, so there's a lot of general sensory information coming in here for the cranial nerve. So I'm just going to say, so here it's general, and this is blue. Is that coming up as blue? Yeah. General sensory for the face, okay, so all of your face, 3 different divisions, we'll break it down when we get there, but you should know that all of your face, your external ear, so all the external parts to your ear, okay. It's also responsible for sensory information coming from your cornea. Okay, so if somebody touches the white of your eye, general sensory information coming from your nasal cavities and your oral cavities, so just general sensation. We'll put nasal and oral cavities. And also general sensation, not taste, but just sensation from the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. So, a lot of sensory information going through cranial nerve number 5, right? Being received by cranial nerve number 5. There's also another important piece that's not general sensory, but proprioception information. Okay, so I'm going to put a different color. I'm going to make that this more of an aqua color. So, proprioception information. Yeah, you can see that. Hopefully that looks different. Proprioception from muscles of mastication. Okay, so just general proprioception information from muscles of mastication. And then finally, it has a little bit of motor function. The motor function I'm going to make in red. So it's involved in motor for muscles of mastication. Okay, and your muscles of mastication are going to be your masseter, temporalis, and your medial and lateral pterygoids. Okay, so just a little bit of motor function. but a really important motor function. It's going to be the motor function for mastication. So your masseter, temporalis, and your medial lateral pterygoids are all involved in chewing. Okay, and that's the only motor function. So trigeminal, the fifth cranial nerve, has a huge sensory function. It's got all of your face, it's got your ear, it's got the inside of your mouth, the inside of your nose, plus the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. Okay, it also has proprioception information coming from those muscles of mastication. And then the motor, just a little bit, only those muscles of mastication. Questions about cranial nerve number 5? That's a big one. Lots of information. Most of it is sensory, but it's just a little bit. And moving on, thinking about cranial nerve number 7, it's a little bit opposite in that cranial nerve number 7 is much more motor than it is sensory. Okay? So cranial nerve number 7, there's going to be your facial nerve. Oh, yeah. I didn't put down my midline. Here's my middle. Left and right sides. Okay, your facial nerve, if you remember, so the abducens, cranial nerve number 6, is most medial, and then your facial nerve is just going to be a little lateral to that. Okay, coming out of the pons. So here's your facial. The origin, like I said, is the pons. As far as general motor function for the facial nerve, there's some voluntary motor activities that you need to be aware of. I'll put motor here. And the majority are the muscles of facial expression. So for example, if I asked you to smile, close your eyes real tight, puff out your cheeks, all that stuff. Any kind of facial expression that you make is done by cranial nerve number 7. So I'll put muscles of facial expression. Muscles of facial expression. And then there's a teeny tiny little muscle in your middle ear that helps dampen sounds. It's known as your stapedius muscle. S-T-A-P-E-D-I-U-S. So you have all of your muscles of facial expression and your stapedius muscle. It's just a small muscle in your middle ear. In addition to the voluntary motor activity, there's some involuntary motor activity that's happening, and that has to do with glandular secretion. And for glandular secretions, I'm going to use just a plain old black color. Okay, keep up with the colors. So cranial nerve number 7, the facial nerve, is responsible for lacrimal gland innervation. So lacrimal gland, so that's going to be tear formation. Okay. And also your sublingual and submandibular glands. Okay, so think salivary glands. Okay, so your lacrimal and tear formation, and your sublingual and submandibular glands. I'm just put even down. I'll put salivary glands. Okay. So it's not all salivary glands, but just your sublingual and submandibular. That's a lot of motor, right? And then what I said before is there's a little bit of sensory, and the way I like to remember it is you have cranial nerve number 5 does your outer ear. You just think about it as one long canal. So you have your outer ear. The next in the chain is going to be your ear canal. So cranial nerve number 7 is general sensation for the ear canal. just my basic blue. Then I'm going to switch over to purple, and purple is going to indicate taste. Okay, the ability to taste. And the ability to taste specifically from the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. So this is different than just feeling. So just feeling the anterior, so if something touched the anterior 2/3 of your tongue, cranial nerve 5 is involved. If you're tasting sweet, sour, coffee, something, that's cranial nerve number 7 is involved in that taste. Okay, and that's the purple is the taste. Questions? So you can see a whole lot of motor and just a little bit of sensory. Okay. All right, moving on. Cranial nerve number 9. Down here is going to be your glossopharyngeal. Boy. Cranial nerve number 9 is going to be the first one that comes out of the medulla. So it's down here. We talked about the pre-olivary sulcus is that little line that separates the pyramid from the olive. But there's also a post-olivary sulcus. It's just another sulcus behind the olivary nucleus, or behind the olive, and that's called your post-olivary sulcus. So the glossopharyngeal nerve specifically comes out of the medulla in the region of the post-olivary sulcus. Okay, so that's nothing more than the second bump after the olive. Okay, kind of like I talked about cranial nerve number 5 being more sensory than motor. Well, cranial nerve number 9 is more sensory than motor, and cranial nerve number 10 is more motor than sensory. Okay, so they're kind of stacked up that way. Cranial nerve number 9 has a whole bunch of functions. Okay, a lot of them people can forget pretty easily. But let's start with this general sensation. Okay, since it's mostly sensory. So there's general sensory. So the general sensory is going to be just the sensation that comes from the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Okay, then there's part of your, at the back of your mouth, you have something called your naso and oropharynx. Okay, your pharynx in general. It's going to be the general sensation from naso and oropharynx area. Okay, so posterior 1/3 of the tongue, way back there. Naso and oropharynx, kind of the back of your, just before you get to your throat. Okay, and then the last part has to do with the ear. Okay, you go from external ear, cranial nerve 5. Ear canal, cranial nerve 7. Okay? And then the next down the chain is going to be your middle ear. Okay? So you're going to have general sensation from your middle ear for cranial nerve number 9. That's your general sensory. Then we're going to switch over here to purple because it also has taste from the posterior 1/3 of your tongue. So whether you feel it, Alex?
Just clarify what you mean by middle ear.
Middle ear?
Yeah.
It's the next it's the next step down from your ear canal. So you have, it's the next step down from your ear canal. It's the area of your ear where those bones are located for hearing. Okay, so all those bones and then separated by the eardrum. Okay, that's your middle ear. Your inner ear is the next step down, and we'll talk about hopefully a secure system later. Okay, so that's the next step down. Your ear canal is just the external, most external part, and then you have your middle, and then your. Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess just picking up, when you say outer ear, is that like?
That's your
this?
outer ear. So I've been sitting here tugging on it. Yep, that's your outer ear. That's your external. That's the external portion of your ear. Okay, it's good. So if you feel something on the posterior 1/3 of your tongue, or if you taste something on the posterior 1/3 of your tongue, that's your glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, so both are hooked up, both taste and general sensation there. And there's one more that I want to indicate in purple. Okay, and this is a weird one, and this is going to be your carotid body. Talk more about that. That's the one that everybody forgets. So hopefully we'll keep going with it. And that's all your general sensory stuff. Okay, all that sensory information. There's just a little bit of motor associated with cranial nerve number 9. So I'll put the red here, and this is going to be your motor. And it's one little muscle that's involved in swallowing. Okay. Most of the swallowing is going to be associated with cranial nerve number 10, but cranial nerve number 9 has just a little bit of the swallowing. It innervates one muscle. It's called your stylopharyngeal muscle. Okay, your stylopharyngeal is the motor. Majority of the motor. And then there's one more basic glandular function, which we've been classifying with motor, and that is it innervates the parotid gland. And that's just another salivary gland. Yes?
So the stylopharyngeal muscle be voluntary motor?
That's voluntary motor. Yep, the majority of the voluntary motor for swallowing comes from cranial nerve number 10. But cranial nerve number 9 just contributes one muscle to that swallowing process. Okay, and your parotid gland is just one of your salivary glands. Okay, so cranial nerve number 7 has the other salivary glands. It's got sublingual and submandibular. Down here, cranial nerve number 9 takes one of those, the parotid gland, and innervates the parotid glands for saliva production. Yes? Ian?
Is the carotid body under the taste category?
Yes, it's under the taste category for a particular reason. We'll get there. Okay? I'm trying to get you to associate colors because the colors are going to go with the nuclei that cranial nerve is using. Okay? But a lot of different nuclei, but we'll put it all together when we come back. Okay? Okay, so carotid body is purple. Everybody good with cranial nerve number 9? Questions? Okay, that's all for cranial nerve number 9. It's got a lot of function, right? Mostly sensory, just a little bit of motor. Then looking at cranial nerve number 10, it's going to be your vagus. All right, there's vagus. The vagus is going to be coming out of the medulla. Remember, it's below the level of the glossopharyngeal, so it's going to be right here. Okay. So this one's glossopharyngeal. This one's vagus. Okay. So the origin of the vagus nerve is going to be the medulla, and again, it's going to arise out of the post-olivary sulcus. motor function. Vagus has a lot of motor function. So this is voluntary motor function. Okay, it's going to be responsible for the muscles of your soft palate. As well as all of the muscles in your pharynx and larynx. Okay, your pharynx is just the next part of your throat. After you come out of your mouth, you enter an area that's called your pharynx. You have your nasal and oropharynx, and then the next section down is going to be your larynx, and your larynx is just another word for your voice box. Okay, so it's just on the chain all the way down your throat. Lots of different parts. Okay, and we talked about the autonomic being green, so I'm going to switch back to the autonomic being green. So the vagus nerve, just like ocular motor, has some autonomic functions, and it has parasympathetic. It's the parasympathetic from the heart, lungs, and GI tract. Yes?
Doesn't it also indicate the diaphragm?
No, the diaphragm is
Oh, it's the
C4.
front.
Diaphragm is C4.
Okay,
Intermittent.
sorry, I was kind of stuck.
That's okay.
I don't know why I thought that.
Yeah. I just know the patients C4 are they need a breathe, they need to be on a ventilator. Okay. So heart parasympathetic, and that's parasympathetic information coming in. We'll talk about what that means as we go through cranial nerve number 10. There's going to be some general sensory, and that's going to be this blue color. Just a little sensory. From the larynx and epiglottis. You see that? Yeah. So just general sensation from the larynx and epiglottis. And then switching over to the purple color here, we're going to talk about taste. So the general sensation for taste from the base of the tongue. The base is just the very, very lowest part where your tongue actually inserts into your mouth. Base of tongue and epiglottis. Okay, that's just going to be general taste. And I'm going to stick with the purple color. It's going to use the same nucleus, and that's going to be visceral sensation. This is just sensation from heart, lungs, and GI. Okay, so just visceral sensory information. So sensory information coming from your viscera is going to be carried through cranial nerve number 10, which is your vagus nerve. So vagus has a lot of territory to cover. That's why they call it the wanderer. Okay, it does lots of different stuff. A lot of things involved in swallowing, a lot of heart, lung, GI kind of activity. Questions? A lot of information. The hardest ones, I think, are these mixed cranial nerves. You know, I've used the colors for a reason. So when you guys come back from fall break, we're going to talk about the cranial nerve nuclei that are associated with this, and they're all going to be the same colors. So you'll see that the colors go with a specific nucleus, okay? Or a specific motor or sensory or mixed cranial nerve nucleus.